Cool. So Trina, for those who don't know who you are, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I am Trina Schessel. I am part of the Northern Nerd Network, and we have a podcast as well called the Northern Nerdcast.
Cool. And we've been on the show before, Nick and I. So that was a really fun time, and we felt that it was a good opportunity to kind of return the favor and have you guys on, and I think we're in for a treat here. Rob is still away on dad/baby duty. I don't know if he's aware, but the dad/baby part lasts for longer than 2 months, but I guess we'll cross that bridge when it comes. But no, in the meantime,
2 months from now, my God, guys, did you know I still have a baby?
It's like on that episode of The Office when Michael's like, it's like, I don't even know if I'll want a baby in 2 months. So yeah, anyway, Trina's here and we're happy to have her. So let's jump right in here. We got a couple points of follow-up here. So last episode I mentioned that I was wanting to try Schmilk. It is a Soylent alternative or Soylent competitor, I guess you'd call it. And
a meal replacement, perhaps.
Yes, indeed. Nutritional complete beverage thing.
We're getting to the point where it's taking on like Xerox territory. It's like Soylent.
Yeah, well, I mean, like longtime listeners of the show should know what Soylent is, but yes, it is a meal replacement beverage, not dissimilar to something like Boost or Ensure, but it tends to be a bit less. I don't know if artificial is the right word.
It's like those, but it's designed such that you could subsist on it alone and still be okay, whereas you shouldn't do that with a lot of like other products that people might be familiar with.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are marked more as a supplement to say, if you're not getting your vitamins, then you can take this beverage. But they're trying to develop a couple different products that you can just have that and you'll be fine. Like from, your macros, like your proteins, carbohydrates, obviously vitamins, all that kind of stuff.
The other one.
Yeah, fats.
There you go.
So okay, two out of three macros isn't bad, Nick.
Yeah, no, you're on point. This is good.
So anyway, I was trying to get a hold of some Schmilk. Most of these products are ordered online. You can't find them locally, so you have to order them online, get them shipped to you. And in the case of Schmilk, they are based out of the States. So when they shipped their product to me, it along the way got lost and never arrived. And I wonder, sad.
Is that like I don't know what our FDA is called, but at the border are like Food and Drug, because it's not been approved for use here. Did they kind of step in, or
Nick, help me out here. What's the regulatory agency called? I'm blanking.
I believe we would be talking about Health Canada in this particular scenario, but it would be the Canada Border Services Agency that would be at the border.
Yeah, for the shipping part, but I will do some real time follow-up.
For the shipping part,
Canada.
That is like crossing the border. That's the deal.
No, the agency that said that Soylent wasn't allowed to sell in Canada. That was
Health
a different
Canada.
Agency. That wasn't Health Canada. Well,
it wasn't Health Canada.
It was like a division of Health Canada. Anyway, let's go with Health Canada. I know what you're saying.
Let's get into another semantic debate. We've only had like one or two of those this week. Why not a third? Why not? Let's just go for it.
So at that rate, you may as well say like Trudeau's not letting Soylent sell in Canada because they're all under Trudeau.
Yeah, there you go.
The Queen is not letting Soylent into Canada because it's all under the executive of the Queen.
Exactly. So it got held up at the border and got lost on the tracking. And the follow-up that I'd like to mention is that my Schmilk actually arrived.
Oh,
it arrived. It arrived yesterday. Literally yesterday, after 2 months. The ship date on the package said January 29th. So
nice.
So
they tested your Schmilk and figured out there were no like radioactive isotopes in it.
Well, I have no idea what actually happened with it, but like it arrived, so I'm glad about that. But it's funny because after waiting basically a month, if not 6 weeks for my schmilk, I was like, okay, screw it. I'm going to order something different because there are a couple other alternatives to Soylent. So one of them is, well, there's a bunch actually. There's like Joylent. There's one called Jimmy Joy. Maybe that is Joylent. I'm confused. And then, anyway, there's a couple others. So I tried one called Whole Food, which is what was recommended by the guy who owns or runs Schmilk or Super Body Fuel. And they have a shipping post based out of Mississauga. So it's obviously easier to ship into Canada when you're already in Canada. You don't have to deal with the border stuff. So I was able to order that, and I tried that, and it was really good. But after I received that, then basically around the same time, my schmilk actually arrived. So I was able to try both at the same time. And I have to say that I do like the Whole Food shake better. Just nicer flavor. Like you literally can't taste any of like the aspartame or artificial sweeteners in it or flavorings or anything like that. It's just a nice chocolatey taste. Whereas the schmilk that I tried, there was quite a bit of a artificial sweetener aftertaste to it. But I did try the cinnamon flavor of the schmilk, and it was quite good. You know, all things considered, given that it had that artificial sweetener aftertaste.
Did you feel full after?
I did actually. Yeah, like it's one of those things where like you expect to have to, you know, have like snacks in between meals. So ideally, instead of having 3 large meals, you have, you know, 4 or 5 like lower calorie meals. So a serving of the schmilk is about 300 to 400 calories after you mix it with milk. And then the Whole Food, the serving size is quoted as 2 scoops, which is 500 calories. And that's without mixing with anything. So if you add water, then obviously your calorie content wouldn't go up. But I used 1 scoop of the Whole Food and mix it with milk to basically have the same sort of calorie content as the schmilk that I was trying. And that seemed to hold me over for a couple hours until I had like, you know, another little snack and that kind of thing. So it's been working out for me pretty well. I just don't like having to think about what I'm going to eat. Like I eat because I'm hungry. Like for
grab what's there.
Kind of. It's like I'm very lazy. That's what it comes down to. Like I get up in the morning and I don't want to like have to make myself lunch. So it's like I'll either take leftovers from dinner before, or I'll like throw together a sandwich, or I'll just like buy Subway or something like that at lunch. Which I mean, can't go wrong with Subway, but it's not exactly a good plan to have Subway every day.
Real-time follow-up here. Sorry.
Sure.
We are talking about the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency.
There we go.
See, I knew there's an I and an F and an A in there, but I couldn't remember what order they were.
They had an investigation triggered after I think the issues with the bars, with the. Yeah, no.
The bars were a separate issue.
It was just the big recall.
Yeah, so the bars were recalled by Soylent voluntarily because they were having bad reactions with some people having them. The CFIA part was because the nutrition labeling was not up to Canadian standards. So like we had a whole backstory about it, and initially it was thought that it was because it didn't have enough fat content to be calling itself a meal replacement, but there's actually a whole list of things that it didn't meet according to government standards. So
it was like too much fat, too many, more than one prohibited additive. One's fine, like you're not allowed to put any of these in. Well, you can put 1 in, but not 2. I swear to God, if you put 2 in. No, I also worked with the CFIA at work recently.
Oh.
They do a lot of stuff related to phytosanitation. And I want to thank our CFIA overlords for being so nice and reasonable.
So what's you said phytosanitation?
Phytosanitation.
What's that?
So at work we deal with regulated soils as a external standard to test, and a regulated soil is one that comes from somewhere outside Canada. And do you remember the book Everything's Going to Kill Everybody from one of the Cracked authors?
Not specifically. I recall a couple different books that were similar in nature.
Okay, well, just to illustrate the problems that can come out of, tossing soil around willy-nilly, they tested a bacteria that was going to be used for ethanol production, and it was really good at converting everything into ethanol. And for additional context, first generation ethanol production is where you're taking things like grain and fermenting it to alcohol to use as a fuel. But that's not great because you're then getting into a food versus fuel economy, and like the price of corn is going to go up because you're using it for all this yada yada yada. Anyway, so what you really want to get is to second gen, where you're using just base cellulose, so you don't have to use the kernels of corn that we eat. You can use the rest of the stalk to provide a feedstock. And so they had a bacteria that was doing this really well, but they tested it in regular soil or sterilized soil to see how it would react, and it was fine. But then one of the peer reviewers said you should really try this in non-sterilized soil to see what happens. And turns out that bacteria entirely colonized all of the non-sterile soil and managed to like metabolize everything and convert it to alcohol. Like all the inorganic materials survived, but the organic materials were all converted. So if there had been an outbreak of this bacteria, it would just like consume everything and salt the earth with ethanol. And that would be your continent just done.
Wow.
So it is important that the CFIA makes sure that you're not just, tossing soil out the door, because bad things can get in and then just colonize the Americas.
Wow.
Well, I was thinking about how when you travel, there's signs posted all over the airport on your declaration and on your declaration form. It's like if you've been to a farm or whatever recently, like you need to declare that.
Mm-hmm.
And I presume for that reason, because of the soil contamination.
Well, and there are also animal diseases, but
yeah, of course. But I guess like when you think about soil, like it's its own like ecosystem effectively, right? So just what's in the soil, like the organic matter, like that, if you cross contaminate that, you could end up in a bad situation, diseases aside.
And that's why I boiled a lot of dirty water last couple weeks
for work.
That's right.
Yes.
I mean, this is aside from my usual like dirt slurry boiling that I do as a hobby.
You mean more dirt boiling than you normally do?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I got to take my passion and bring that into the workplace.
Anyway, that's my Schmilk follow-up. Nick, you had some follow-up on some nuclear energy news.
Did I ever? Now, if I'm recalling correctly, and I might not be, the first self-sustaining nuclear reactor in the world is shutting down. Pausing for gasps. There we go. Yeah, so the first reactor in Chalk River, Ontario is shutting down.
How come?
Because it is so old.
Oh.
I think it started operation in I want to say 1957. No, it was even before that. I can't remember. But this is like, again, if I'm recalling correctly, this was the reactor they set up as part of the Manhattan Project with the atomic. So 1947 probably. So that's where it started its life, and it started as like one of the first research institutions focusing on atomic energy, and I mean also atomic weaponry. But it's just so crazy that this has been around for so long, and they finally went, okay guys, we actually need to stop this. And you will remember it from a few years ago when it stopped producing medical isotopes, and everyone had a great big freak out about it. Do you remember that, Mike?
No, I don't.
I see. This is like all my pure science stories where we can talk about it for 5 minutes and be like, wow, Nick, it's nice that you're so passionate about things.
So you mentioned the Manhattan Project. You're saying that this was just coincidentally around the same time, or is built for the Manhattan Project?
The nuclear scientists of the Manhattan Project helped work on this reactor, I think, during the war.
Is that because just Ontario is very mineral rich for the...
No, it's because it was far away from everything. And they were like, man, if this goes wrong, we need this to go wrong, like, away from people.
We need a big slab of granite that's not going to do anything with the radioactive material. Is that basically the gist?
No, that's not it.
No.
It's like, it's a whole big thing. I encourage all readers and Mike to look up the National Research Universal Reactor.
Okay, we'll put a link in the show notes. People can read it if they want.
Okay, sorry, 1949.
Okay. Cool. So that's very sad. It seems like, was it a functional reactor, or was it just kind of there still? Just
it was functioning. I mean, you don't really want to just stop the core willy-nilly.
Can't just pour cold water on it.
No, that's like the worst thing you can do. You'll get a steam explosion.
Cool. So today, we're 20 minutes into the show already. We wanted to bring up the Facebook whole debacle thing. It's been happening for, I think, a month at this point now. I think when we did our last show, it was just coming up or just being talked about, I think. Nick, can you recall when you wanted to talk about this first?
No.
Okay. Anyway, it's been in the news for a bit, but I feel it's worth talking about it because I think it's a bit more... There's more coming to light with it. Like Zuckerberg just did a deposition, questioning trial thing in front of people and cameras and stuff, and that was a whole deal. So I think for posterity we should mention it so that we can say we've talked about it. And I'm interested to talk about it too, just for kind of the more general considerations as far as social media and online privacy and that kind of stuff go. I think it's pretty interesting to think about because these days social media, like, everyone's involved in it. It's common to everyone, and I think we all kind of go through our daily pace without thinking too much about what we're putting online. And I think internalizing the level of privacy and security, or lack thereof, that's actually out there. So Nick, did you want to introduce us to this story in some small way?
I mean, the big freak out started, it would have been at least 3 weeks ago or so, when, oh man, this is terrible radio because I'm thinking.
So the New York Times, in collaboration with a couple other newspapers, did a whole kind of investigation on the firm Cambridge Analytica, and they were based out of Massachusetts, and they were contracted out by the Trump campaign to do some analysis on demographics and marketing to them, and trying to, quote unquote, influence voters. I mean, that's what every political campaign is about. So Cambridge bought data from Facebook, and that's Facebook's whole business model, is using data to make money. And it turns out that data that they used was a little bit questionable, in whether they were allowed to even have it, and what they did with it. So that's kind of the whole scandal right now, is how were they able to get this data, or why were they allowed to? And with what they did with it, is that ethical, or should they have been allowed to do that? I guess that's kind of the whole question here. I'm not as interested in talking about the political aspects, though I think we should still talk about it.
That's like my biggest interest.
I was gonna say, I think Nick, you can kind of shed some light on that. Just give a bit of context to what was going on with that. But I also want to touch on the idea of putting information online, specifically, in this case, Facebook, and what we expect to have done with that data, and where, what value we place on that data and it being kept within Facebook. So, as far as the political stuff goes, Nick, maybe you can kind of get us started on that.
So the political stuff kind of centers around Cambridge Analytica, as I understand it. And Cambridge Analytica got a hold of some Facebook, like large data sets or something like that. And I believe that was via an app or something like that on Facebook. And honestly, like, my take on that is it's pretty clear what Facebook has access to, and the apps tell you what they want access to. And so people handed it over. And like later, Facebook did get a hold of a few people with these kinds of data sets and said, hey guys, you're not supposed to have this. And they were like, cool, okay. And Facebook was like, can you delete those, please? And the places were like, yeah, we can totally do that. And Facebook was like, do you swear? And we're like, we swear. It was like, do you swearsies? Can we have a pinky swear on this? And they were like, totally swearsies. Like, we're cool, Facebook. We're cool. Like, okay, I think this warrants zero follow-up whatsoever. Okay, I think we're good now. And so, like, the political significance is that I want to say Cambridge Analytica was involved with the Trump campaign. And I also want to say the Leave campaign in the UK.
With, the Brexit.
The whole, I would say Brexit, but yes, it was a part of that thing.
Do you say exit?
I do say exit because it has an X in it.
Yeah, well, anyway. How many archipelagos are in the UK, Nick?
What does a child do to a house on Halloween? Yes. Quite. Pause for awkwardness and onwards. So, and it came out of a whistleblower with wonderfully pink hair who also has a Canadian connection, which is why CBC followed it so closely. He worked on, I think, a mid to late aughts Liberal campaign. And most of the Liberal Party members who were asked about him had no recollection of this guy. But one person who did recall who he was said, yeah, he was like super into micro-targeting based on large data sets. So I read that line. I was like, so he was like a decade ahead of the curve. Good for that guy. I can see why he worked for such a big firm. But yeah, so within a political context, the ability to have that much data on that many people, like, Facebook grants you the ability to micro-target your ads. So targeting to this specific demographic with these interests, like, it can correlate really highly with, swing voters or voters that you really want to mobilize within a campaign. And if you can eke out like just the tiniest difference in the right places or within the right people, you can absolutely swing an election in the direction you want it to go. No, and like with Brexit and the Trump campaign in mind, you can swing an election in spite of what the polls are saying about that election.
I think between Trump and Brexit, I feel like both had the potential to go either way. I don't think it was like, I'd be more surprised if, say, like in the Canadian election where, somehow like the NDPs had government all of a sudden for whatever reason, right? Where it wasn't really seen as a possibility. I mean, not to say they weren't expected to like get seats, but where they had majority kind of thing, right? It's like, well, where did that come from? Like, how did that happen? Like, I think it's one of those things where it's easy to attribute it to the Cambridge Analytica thing because we know that that's what happens. Like, oh, that must be why. But I feel like there was so much just general discussion on social media, just between people outside of advertising or whatnot, that was kind of always going to be like a coin flip.
Well, it is a perfect storm. Like there are many factors at play, but I think you're undervaluing like the sheer surprise of the Trump election. Like on the night of, Trump had one, like there was one path to victory. He had to win all the states he eventually won, and Hillary had like, I don't remember the actual numbers, but it was I think at least a couple dozen combinations that she could have won with, and the one that actually happened was the one specific to Trump. And so, I mean, Ruski trollbots, Cambridge Analytica, like it was a variety of factors, but even contributing to that like peculiar win is quite a feat.
So
yes.
I feel like it would be hard to say for sure, yes, this did have that amount of impact over that specific election, though.
Yeah,
like, are they trying to quantify it at all?
Like it's a lot of correlation causation kind of stuff, and there's statistics that you can use to try to pull causation out of correlation. But in this case, like I don't know what you can do to be able to say that, yeah, those people voted that way because of the influence that the Cambridge Analytica involvement had. Nick?
You're absolutely right on that point. But given their involvement with two long odds right-wing populist movements, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think the bigger issue that I have is the Russian involvement in this whole thing, because I guess the Cambridge Analytica firm had connections to Russia and had meetings with them and whatever. And similar to the pinky swear on the data stuff, it's like,
Isn't that so?
Did you?
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, there's like a whole thing where they were having meetings with Russia, like Russian politicians or whatever, and they're being asked like, were you talking about politics? It's like, oh, no, it was just a visit. We're just two guys talking. There's no politics happening. And it's like, okay, as long as you say so.
Like Trump campaign members said.
What's that?
That, like those direct quotes. They're like, you talked to this Ruski at this dinner. He's like, did I? That's crazy. I wouldn't have talked about politics. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, there was the Cambridge Analytica had Russian involvement as well. At least if the articles that I was reading were accurate.
Okay.
So yeah.
There's a lot of meetings with Russians not talking about politics leading up to that election.
Russians must be like really good company.
Yeah.
I actually hear that they are.
Talking about hockey and vodka.
No, they're very respectful and social culture.
Yes. I can't speak for myself because I don't know many Russians, but I'll take your word for it.
They haven't, like, whether you're talking to a peer or whether you're talking to someone older or younger, or if you respect them or if you don't respect them, there's like conjugation sounds like a nightmare.
So let's get into the social media privacy aspect, because I think that's, at least within the context of this podcast, is a bit more interesting. Not to say that politics isn't interesting, Nick, but
this is also the least interesting part of the story for me, but go on.
So I guess the reaction from the public after this came out has been mixed, but generally negative. But I think there's actually a pretty healthy mix of people saying, how could they give away our data like that? That was my data. And then there's people who are like, well, yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. Like, what did I think was going to happen with my data? So Trina, what's your, how involved in social media are you, and what type of information do you put online, or what are your expectations of the information that you hand over to companies like Facebook or Google or Snapchat or whatever company that you might be using their services for?
Yeah, I use most of them. I haven't been on Twitter in a while, but I frequent Facebook. I put everything on there pretty much. I try to be a little more careful, but like pictures of my kids and what I had for breakfast and what restaurant I'm at, and I try not to like give too much personal information as far as like what school my kids go to and where we are at a certain time and all that, but I also know that it's not private. And I have an issue with people that like repost all these things like they're going to sell your information if you don't share this 25 times, and it's like they're selling your information anyway. It's just I kind of feel like my information's out on the internet. If I put it there, someone has the opportunity to get to it. It's, I'm responsible for what I put out there. I mean, I don't know that I want it to be sold, and I don't feel it's fair that people are selling information, but I also feel like if I don't want people to know things, then it's my responsibility not to put it up there.
Yeah. And it's become a cliche at this point, but like if you're paying for a service, or if you're using a service but you're not paying for it, then there's some other way that service is making money, which quote unquote makes you the product. Like I think that's a bit melodramatic, but in a sense it's true. It's you're using Facebook, and it's this giant global company that has like trillion, not trillion at this point, but $1 billion valuation, and you don't have to pay for it. Like that's like they must be doing something to make money or have value for that company. So in this case, it's having this giant data set on demographics, and they have a responsibility to make sure that data is treated properly. But and it's all in the end user license agreements that no one reads, but or even if you do read it, you're gonna click on agree anyway. They have that data, and they're able to use that for third parties for blah 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 blah. So the fact that firms like Cambridge Analytica had your data, that shouldn't be a surprise. I think the surprise comes in this specific case where the app that was being used. So just to be clear, the app that they're referring to is like a Facebook app, similar to like Farmville or whatever type, in Facebook app that you get 1 billion invites for, that I turned off people and being able to invite me to. But it's those types of things where you grant those apps access to your profile. But I guess this specific app had also a thing where it had access to your friends' profile information as well.
Oh, okay.
So,
because on those apps, when you click like, which celebrity are you?
Yep.
And it specifically says, do you allow this app to post to your wall as you? Do you allow this app your access to your profile?
Yeah, no, exactly. And so in this case, and that part's even fine for me, because if you're agreeing to it, then that's up to you. But because this app granted access to your friends' profiles as well, it was like, well, that's not what I wanted. Like, if you're that friend, right? It's like, why should my data be given to this company if I'm not even knowing that they're having it, right? Yeah. So that's the kind of the shady part with this case. And then the whole political stuff kind of as a cherry on top.
Do you allow good buddy Igor access to all data? Please say yes.
No, I do not. So that's kind of my approach to all this. And I'm similar to you, where like I put stuff on, Facebook or Twitter, whatever. I'll put pictures, and even to a point, like I think it's more the kind of encouragement from my wife to say, maybe don't like say where a child goes to school. Not that I intentionally say it, but it's like, oh, I guess that's kind of a good point. Like, it's not really relevant, whatever. But I'll still post a picture of us at the park or like whatever, right? Yeah. And it's
like, don't check into every place you're going with your family.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I'm gonna check into my dance class where I go every Tuesday night at 7:00. Like,
yeah, no, exactly.
I put my kids' full names in.
Yeah, but even with that, if you're going to do that, like, you kind of trust that you're not going to be targeted for anything. Like,
Yeah.
and maybe it's ignorance or, you know, delusion or naivete. I don't know what you'd call it, but it's like, unless someone is being specifically targeted, then like chances are like that data or that info isn't going to be used for anything. So you hope that no one feels like they want to target you. But like, I think at this point, most of us have enough stuff online that someone could probably put together a pretty good picture of who someone is and what they do and whatever, if they did enough investigation into it. And I've even seen examples of that. I think like Reddit has had a couple threads where like someone has like doxed someone, you know, to a point where it's like, oh yeah, this is where they go to school, this is where they go to work, this is like their usual shift, like whatever, just based on like their online like social media posts, right? But it's a lot of work to put all that information together. Whereas with this,
I mean, you'd have to be specifically targeting one specific person to do it that way and be like, well, I want to know about this guy and what he's doing when.
Yeah. And I mean, like in the case of Cambridge Analytica, like they were looking to have just almost like metadata demographic information, trying to figure out what types of profiles to target their ads to. I don't know this for sure, but I have a feeling that they're not saying, okay, we want to target this profile, because I don't think Facebook lets you do that.
No.
But I think that you can just analyze, you know, the profiles that, you know, all these people like this type of Facebook page. So it's like, okay, well, we want to target those types of people, right?
Yeah, where it's like, oh, these people like indoor playgrounds and diaper sales. Oh, they must be parents. Let's target them.
Yeah.
Because this is about that.
Yeah. And I've even seen it on, and you know, we've talked about on the show before about targeted advertising. And I'm okay with targeted advertising. I actually prefer it because it's advertising that I actually be interested in seeing. Like if I'm going to see some ads, I'd rather be relevant to me.
Mike, what if those ads were targeted to someone that a political party thought they could swing? What then, Michael? What then?
It's my own fault for being swung. Like no, like I'm serious. Like I think the people who are being, you know, quote unquote swung, like they would have done that anyway. Like, I don't know if you're like, that's the definition of a swing voter is like they're, I don't know,
influenced by outside sources.
Yeah. Like
willing to vote either way. That is the definition of a swing voter.
Like maybe that's just my confidence, you know, false or not, that I'm not that easily influenced by just an ad saying, oh, you know, Trudeau is evil. Like, I mean, I'm showing a bit of my political colors by saying I wouldn't
by saying that he's not actually evil.
But I mean, like, you know, being in Alberta, like you hear a lot of stuff, you know, anti-Trudeau, anti-Notley stuff, and not to say I am hard set one way or the other, but it's like just someone saying stuff like that, that's not going to, you know, swing me. You know, if someone posts, you know, an article or whatever, like I saw a post on Reddit today, how you know, Notley put an open, I guess it was an open letter to Trudeau on the Northern Gateway pipeline. And like it was a well-written letter, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good. You know, a premier stepping up for us, whatever. That influenced me, I guess, you know, saying like, yeah, you know, it's nice to see that. I wouldn't say that I swung that way. I wasn't anti-Notley before, and all of a sudden this letter like swung me. But for all I know, that letter could have been posted by a Russian troll. I don't know. Whoever's trying to influence the Alberta politics, I guess.
Yeah. The thing that gets me is when you're talking about something and you're not even on your phone, and then all of a sudden an ad comes up on Facebook for that specific product or something that you were talking about with somebody, and you're like, are they listening to me? How does that work? Because that's scarier.
Yeah, I've actually seen that this happen again. I think this is large. I feel like it's confirmation bias, but a part of me feels like it's not, because like I was listening to a Hello Internet episode where they talked a lot about tennis and mentioned Roger Federer a couple times. And then that same day, like in my Facebook feed, there's like a Roger Federer or something or other that was unrelated to anything else. Now, it may have been like a anti-perspirant ad or something where I would have been targeted anyway. So that's part of that confirmation bias where like you see a million ads a day that aren't related, but the one that is, you like notice it. So that's part of why I think there isn't too much to it. But I have had that experience where you're talking about something, or like you're talking about, I don't know, 747s like if 747s crash more often, and then you start typing to Google, do 747s, and they'll autocomplete crash more often or something like that, right? It's like, whoa, like that was really creepy. But again, like you search like a million things a day where that doesn't happen. So it's hard to gauge that. But I definitely hear what you're saying, where like a lot of these apps do have access to your microphone. Like your phone is typically like, if you have, you know, the Siri on or the Google Now, where it has the trigger words and it's listening to you, like the microphone is on. So, you know, like maybe these apps are listening to you and trying to figure out what you're talking about and what ads to show you. I honestly don't know.
So how far does that go? Like how far can someone take that? Can they then find a way to record your private conversations and then, you know, sell those to people? And like if somebody really wanted to ruin somebody,
yeah,
they could easily find a way to tap into all that. So is there, I guess, kind of lines that need to be drawn with our security, I guess, with our own technology? That may be a completely off topic.
Well, no, it's very relevant, and like we've had that issue with the NRA with the whole Snowden thing, where like they'll go and request information from whatever company saying, hey, we need the files on whoever. And those companies will either do it, or sometimes they say, no, we can't give you that information, right? And, you know, I applaud those companies who do at least evaluate whether they should or shouldn't based on whatever, right? Like with the Apple's thing with the phones that needed to be unlocked. Like that was a really big landmark example of a company respecting privacy on principle, whether the people that, you know, who own the phones or whether the phones would help the case, like that's irrelevant. It's like on principle, they don't want to set a precedent where a company can just unlock a phone on request by the government, right? Now, like that's not to say that, you know, in the not black market, but like the non-legitimate, you know, obtainment of data, like there's that risk and vulnerability as well. But again, it's a matter of trust with the companies that they'll, you know, knowingly act in the right way and that they're taking the proper like security measures.
Well, and that specifically, like the granting of access of a government to a phone is, as it stands, it could be a very dangerous precedent to set, because that's potentially fine so long as you, like, I don't want to get like conspiracy theory like sounding that way, but it's fine so long as you trust your government. But if there's a sudden change, like, I mean, I'm not saying that I think this is going to happen, but like the communist revolution happened, where all of a sudden the bourgeois had to be targeted, or they wanted to purge certain thinkers. Like, I'm sure they would take it. I'm sure there are extreme people who would take issue with something on your phone.
Yeah.
Yours specifically, Mike.
Well, like if you're being targeted, and that's the whole point, is like, I don't know how much you can get if you're just, if there's like a massive data leak. It's like, yeah, unless someone has a reason to target you. And it's kind of similar with the Apple iPhone unlocking thing. Like, I'm fairly confident that the government would have no reason to request to have my phone unlocked or looked at. But I guess if they wanted to, they could pursue that. But like, I mean, I wouldn't want them to, but it's one of those like, it's one of those like, I have nothing to hide kind of things. Not that I'd say like, hey, look at my phone, but it's like, if they did, like, they wouldn't find anything.
Yeah.
They wouldn't find anything right now. Like, Mike, say for example, the most dickish of all the Pokemon Go teams, Team Valor. Apologies, Trina, if you play. Say Team Valor was tired of having to compete with everybody, and they wanted to be the very best, like no one ever was. And they took power in government, and then they started checking your phone to see if you were one of the filthy Instinct or Mystic. And they just started imprisoning all the people who were Instinct or Mystic so that they wouldn't compete with them for gym control. What then, Michael? What then?
That sounds like a crazy Pogo fanfic that I would definitely read and or watch.
Okay. In a world where Team Valor wants to be the very best.
That's a good one.
All of a sudden, Mike's standing there. No, I didn't think the government would find anything objectionable about my phone. No.
So, Nick, what are your expectations of your privacy or security of information online?
I mean, right now, as it stands, I have an expectation that everything I do on my phone or online is publicly available. Like, I just assume that someone could potentially read over my shoulder. And you just have to do things with that expectation.
Yeah, I think that's probably a safe bet. It's just one of those similar to how, employees and employers have this thing of an employer finding out someone posted something online and, responding to that or disciplining them, whatever. But I feel like, in my memory anyway, a lot of the time the employer is found to be justified in their actions when they have, people portraying themselves or saying things online on social media, typically, either defaming the company or acting against company policy or whatever, right? And the response is like, oh well, like, it's my social media life, it's my personal life, my private life, whatever. And it's like, well, it's not. Like, it's don't say or post anything. Well, I mean, about anyone. This is just a good general rule as a person. It's like, don't say anything that you wouldn't say in front of the person, kind of, right? Like, I mean, outside of talking to a lawyer or doctor, like, or just in confidence with a person. But if you're saying anything like semi-publicly, don't say anything about someone that you wouldn't say in front of them, basically, or behave in a way that you wouldn't want, your boss to see or your significant other to see, like, whatever. I don't know. I think it's just a good general rule to live by, and I guess maybe that's why I feel that I wouldn't have too much to worry about. But I can also understand that, if someone has a bit more like sensitive stuff that might be discovered that they wouldn't want seen, then I can see why they wouldn't like the idea of Facebook just sharing their information or their data with other people.
I can also tell you, having worked / volunteered in and around politics, there are some conversations where you don't have them over a phone. You say, hey, can we meet here?
Yeah.
Like, not necessarily on our phones.
Yeah.
Because of the risk of possibly having those phone records, like, obtained, kind of the idea?
Not necessarily, just...
You don't want anyone listening in, kind of thing, inadvertently.
You don't want the words written down anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Written, well, that's what I mean, written / recorded.
Yeah.
Right. I was actually thinking about this because, on one hand, I say, I don't expect any of my information to be private or kept secure or whatever. But when you look at, say, like, medical records or like the CRA, when you submit your tax forms, like, not that there's a huge level of, groundbreaking secrets in my CRA tax form, but it's like, when you submit those types of things or have those records, like, you expect those to be private, not for any specific reason or purpose. It's like, well, why would my medical records be obtainable, right? So, like, it's almost like a double standard, because, like, if the government had a similar thing where it's like they sold our data, it's like, that'd be crazy. But maybe that's a little bit different.
Is it though?
Well, that's why I don't know. Like, do you think it's not?
I don't know. I think it's the same kind of agreement that you make, right? You go into the doctor understanding that is a private conversation. So if you go on social media with the understanding that it's not a private conversation, then is it, I don't know. I guess when you agree to go to a doctor and have them keep your medical record, you are signing a user agreement, basically saying, and there's, like, the doctor is saying, I'm not going to share your information unless I have your permission, blah, blah, blah. So when you go sign that agreement on, say, Facebook, saying, well, you can use this information, but I'm not giving you permission to, post on my behalf or find my friend's information, should it be kept at the same kind of level?
Right.
Can you imagine the targeted ads if they had access to your doctor's information? Got an itch that just won't go
Mm.
Well, I mean, like, but that even comes back to like the thing you're talking about, recording conversations. Like, if that was a case, and you start talking about like hemorrhoids, and you can
Yeah.
see like Preparation H ads, it's like, well, that's convenient. I mean,
Yeah.
creepy but convenient. But yeah, I mean, like, and I think it comes back to like when you sign or click on the I agree button when you sign up for Facebook, and it says, you know, we will share your date, you know, might say anonymized data or metadata, whatever, with third parties for the purposes of blah blah blah. Like, I don't think there's an opt-out option for that.
No.
Right? Now, when you on your Facebook profile, and Facebook has been advertising this pretty vehemently the last couple of weeks about that, you do have privacy settings on your account.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the problem is that all those are opt-out. They're not opt-in.
Yeah.
So
you actually have to go in and say, no, I don't want this shared.
Right. And by that point, you know, this perfect case right here is that like by the time you realize those are there, like it's too late because your data's already been shared. So it kind of comes back to, do these companies have a responsibility to make sure these types of things are opt out or opt in, not opt out? You mean if they prompt you to say, hey, can we share your data? Like, I think 100% of people would say no, right? Now, like when I install like a new piece of software, there's often things saying like, oh, are you willing to sign up for like the customer experience program to, you know, share your performance for future upgrades or whatever? Sometimes I'll say yes, but again, like, I guess talking about it now, I don't know what specific system information they're getting. Like, my understanding was always just, you know, when our program's running, like this is the RAM use, this is the processor use, whatever. And like, I don't care about that. Like, have all those numbers that you want. But if it's, you know, tracking whatever, then
I don't want Chrome to know the amount of RAM on my computer that it actually takes up.
Yeah,
I don't want them to know that hardship that they put on me.
Chrome should be well aware of it by now.
Well, and there's a new thing now. We just got a letter from our car insurance company saying, here's this program where you can get this app on your phone and it'll track your driving methods. And if you're considered a safer driver, we'll lower your rate. And I was like, ooh, lower rate. And Dan was like, no way. That's an invasion of privacy. And I'm like, well, is it though? You're giving them permission. And they claim they're not
do
like...
you have anything to hide from me?
Driving wise, maybe. But it's like, we won't keep track of your speed or anything. Just, you know, if you brake hard and if you're, you know, just like your driving habits, what time you're out at night. And it's like, well, like, how far do we take this? Whereas we have things monitoring our every move, basically.
Well, and the thing to remember with those types of things is those insurance companies would never do that if it wasn't in their best interest. Mm-hmm. So like, you'd like to think, oh yeah, I'm a great driver. Yeah. And it's like, are you though? It's like, are they going to raise your rates because you brake harder than they'd like?
Yeah.
And then, you know, we talked about this on, I always forget which episode or show we talked about it on. We talked about it before, either on Tesla or Future Chat, about insurance companies and how like they've gotten so good at analyzing data and setting their premiums and stuff, and, you know, discriminating in the technical term on pricing, but then people complain about it. It's like, that's their job. Like, they're supposed to give better rates to certain types of people. Like, that's the whole reason why they're there. But at a certain point, it just becomes like, you know, the insurance premium is just the cost of whatever. Like, it's just a flat cost for everyone because they're not allowed to discriminate based on whatever. But the thing with the tracking the car performance, like, I've actually considered at times getting like a device like that, like not for the insurance company, but they have just third-party aftermarket stuff that you can put into your car,
like
that will track for you.
Or
no, it's like a thing that you plug into, I don't know, it's not the engine, it's like the computer part of the car, like behind the steering column. I think it's somewhere in there.
It depends on the car.
Yeah, and it will track, you know, exactly that stuff that Trina was mentioning, like that's about braking stuff, like gas mileage, I'm sure you can let it track speed if you wanted to, like just everything that the car computer can see, it will see basically. And then, it'll remind you when to do like tune-ups or whatever changes based on your kilometers, like all that kind of stuff. And I think it could be pretty fun and cool and convenient, whatever. I just haven't gotten around to doing it or haven't wanted it enough to actually do it. But
then would that information be available online?
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
Just local to your phone.
Yeah, like you're signing up for a service for those typically. And so, it's kind of a whole, Facebook Cambridge Analytica situation where like, is that data being sold to insurance companies? Like I almost guarantee that they are.
Yeah.
Right. And you're probably signing an agreement saying that they can have access to your data, whatever, like, in a anonymized way or whatever. Right. So, yeah, it's definitely one of those things that it takes something like the Facebook thing to actually think about and realize that this is probably happening everywhere. And even the thing about selling data and the Russians using whatever, like this isn't happening to just Facebook. Like Facebook just got caught doing it. That's the bottom line. Like I'm sure Instagram is Facebook. I'm sure Twitter and, LinkedIn and Snapchat and like all those types of services all do the same thing, right? Even if it's like isolated, like one-off cases, like it's happened before and it will happen again. It's just like, as a consumer, it's on us to decide if like that risk, if, on that risk evaluation, if that's worth using the service. And personally, I'd prefer, to handpick a couple of services that I pay a couple bucks a month to use if it meant that my data didn't have to be sold or that I didn't have to be targeted for advertising. But in the meantime, that's all we have to work with. And I think as long as that's the only option, like that, people are going to keep doing that, even if it meant that, you had to, go serve 2 years in their mailroom to use their service. Like people probably still do it.
I guess the next question then would be, at what point in all this does everybody just up and leave Facebook? Like what is it going to take for that shift? And is that ever going to be a thing?
I wanted that to happen when Google Plus came out and we're still here. So.
We
tried Google Plus.
Yeah, we tried.
Because I'm like, I part of me is like, I would just want to leave Facebook, but then I'm like, I wouldn't get invited to events. I wouldn't know what's happening in my family that doesn't live here.
You're making a Faustian deal because it's like I had the same thing. I now have Google Messenger on my phone, despite my protests, because Kai and I were going to an event, and she's like, "Oh, can you do Messenger right now?" I was like, "No, it's not on my phone. I don't want it on my phone." She's like, "Well, we need to message these people." It's like, I don't want to, like, I don't have it. She's like, "Well, I don't want it on my phone." Like, oh, good. Well, joke's on you. Like, now they have your data anyway because you're my friend.
Yeah.
But
like we live in such a fear of missing out world that like, it's like we're almost all going to have to take this blood pact of, yes, let's all leave Facebook right now, or we're all just going to stay and keep doing what we do.
And I mean, given the utility of Facebook, I feel like we're just going to migrate to a different network that does the same or similar thing, or enables the same thing.
Unless they pinky promise not to, Nick.
Well, and we just got onto one called Vero, and it claims that it's ad free and all this. And I'm like, okay, it doesn't cost anything. How is this ad free? What are you doing with my data? But I think it's only ad free for so many people, and then they're going to start charging for it. But
I think what they want to do is that's like a premium idea where they actually charge you to use the service. Well, they will eventually. They just want a user base first.
Yeah.
Or that's
so
what
then
I've
it's like, well,
read about it.
And then at what point? And they're totally like going off this, hey, you can trust us. We're not going to sell. And it's like, well, at what point though are you? Because
we will definitely not sell your data to the Russians. But the North Koreans are totally fair game. I'm sorry. We have to make money.
Yeah.
I think, talking about Facebook going away or whatever, I feel like that's not going to happen. Like people aren't going to leave Facebook for something else, but there might be more of the case where like our kids' generation won't be on Facebook, right? Because I think Facebook right now, like for kids and maybe even like teens or preteens or whatever, like Facebook is where your parents are.
Yeah, it's so
right?
true.
So like you don't want to use that as your main thing. Like they might still have an account, maybe, but I don't think that's going to be the primary social network. Like I think at this point, like things like Snapchat or Instagram are probably more commonly used, like on on a hourly basis or daily basis than Facebook is for kids anyway.
Yeah, I feel that's I have cousins that are teenagers and they're on Facebook, but they never post anything. They're on Instagram and they're posting everything on Instagram. So yeah, I feel that's probably how it's going to shift. It'll be the generational.
Which, I mean, again, Instagram is owned by Facebook, so Facebook doesn't really care whether it's on Facebook or Instagram.
I mean, but at the same time, every social network or social app that has existed has peaked and fallen. And it like the early data would suggest that Facebook just peaked like last year. And now like Snapchat, Instagram, others are still like they haven't yet peaked. Google Plus. Its peak is decades away. But yeah, like I don't know. I feel like we could have had this conversation, I forget how many years ago, but about MySpace, saying like, like it's going to take a generational shift to get people away from MySpace, and who's on MySpace anymore?
No, but that's the point though, is that it was a generational shift.
Was it?
I don't think it was, because we were on MySpace.
I wasn't on MySpace.
Well, you weren't hip and with it, Mike.
So like growing up, the social networks used were like Nexopia and MySpace, right? And then I didn't have either of those. I maybe signed up for Nexopia and I was like, what the heck is this crap? So then I obviously didn't use it. And then after graduating high school, then people are like, oh, are you on Facebook? And I'm like, what's that? And it's like, oh, it's for students to sign up and blah, 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 blah. Because you needed a EDU email at the time to sign up for Facebook. So when I was at the U of C, that's when I signed up for a Facebook account and had my grad picture as my profile picture like everyone else did. And that's when I came onto there. And I think that's when most people in, our generation got onto Facebook, was around that, graduating high school or just coming into high school time, when it was kind of only for people in schools. And then they obviously opened it up to everyone. But I don't know what would cause a similar shift. Like there has to be obviously some level of difference between like what's currently available and what's not. And I don't know if saying, we're not going to share your data, if that's going to be the thing that causes that, because I don't think that's sustainable for a company to operate on, right? So they either need like ads or like a pay model or sell your data, which is effectively the advertising aspect. Yeah. So without any of those, like people aren't going to pay any amount for social media. No. Like not at all. Like they'll pay for, some people might pay for added benefits like premium features, but they're not going to pay just to use it.
No, I wouldn't. Not when there's other options that are free.
Yeah. But again, the ones that would potentially sell your data or serve you targeted advertising, which you may or may not be okay with.
Well, and I feel like that was one of the reasons that a lot of people left MySpace, was that the ads started becoming more and more prevalent. And you would log into MySpace and be like, it's just all ads. That's all I'm seeing. So I'm not going to bother anymore.
Yeah, I was never on MySpace, and I've kind of heard bits and pieces.
Hip and with it, Mike.
I didn't have my own band.
Neither was I. So like,
you didn't know how to copy and paste code.
So do we have anything else to say on the Facebook thing? Anyone?
I don't think so.
No? Yeah,
I mean, I will share one frustration. We were sitting at the lunch table at work, and someone was saying, "Oh yeah, I saw this story. Someone actually like downloaded their metadata that Facebook had access to, and it was huge. It was like all their phone calls, like when they called and how long they were on the phone and like how many text messages they sent." And I was like, why is this a surprise to you people?
Yeah.
Well, and I think when apps asked for access to contacts or your phone call dialer or whatever, my assumption is that it's there because these apps have calling features. Like within Messenger, you can make phone calls, right? So it's
or
like,
they
yeah,
want to import contacts or something.
or yeah, right. So it's like, well, obviously they need access to it. Like, why not, right? Like that's all they're going to use it for. But Nick, I guess if you're saying that Facebook did had access to your log, I mean,
Is that too far?
yeah. Again, like, what are they going to do with it? Like, I don't know. Like, that's up to them. If they do anything with it to begin with, I don't know. But I guess I didn't realize that kind of data was there. Would that tell me, or would that make me not want to use it? Like, I don't know. I don't think so. Not at this point anyway. Because again, I don't see any harm in them knowing how long I was on the phone for. Like, I don't even use a phone really. But it's like, what are you gonna do with it? Was on the phone for 10 minutes? Like, okay. Like,
By the way,
again, unless a government agency like asks for those call logs, but they could go to my cell provider for that anyway. So,
but what if they use that information to go to an opposing cell phone provider and say, oh, this guy, he's talking a lot. Maybe you should give him ads for a better plan with more data time or talk time or whatever. Like, could
it be
worked that way?
I'd want that. I'd want to know if there's a better plan. I would say thank you.
Well, Mike clearly accepts and welcomes our new Facebook overlords.
Yeah. So I think that pretty much covers the topic there. Nick, I think you said you have to go.
I do. I have a hard out.
You do have a hard out.
I just wonder, when I leave this conversation, will I be forgotten?
Oh, do we want to talk about that?
Speaking of segues.
Speaking of segues, I came across this story this morning, and at first I thought it was fairly new, but I guess this right to be forgotten thing is actually more of a existing concept that's been around for a while. And I do recall hearing about it a while ago, but I guess there is a case in Europe somewhere, European Union that it started with a guy who wanted his search results, like hits that when you search his name of like a crime he committed before, like he wanted those results removed from Google because he felt it was damaging to him. And the judge had originally said, no, we're not going to get those removed because, it's in the best interest of, society for those results to still be there. Because I guess this guy, in the judgment of the judge, hadn't shown remorse or hadn't changed his ways, whatever. So those results were left. And I guess this second case that someone came to the European Union and said, hey, I want these results removed. And the judge said yes to remove those results. So I guess these appeals or these requests, they originally go through Google or whatever search provider, I guess, to say, hey, can you take these results off? And then Google decides whether to grant it access or not. Again, in the same judgment of, is this in the best interest of society to keep these results on there? And I guess you can appeal Google's decision through whatever legal means. And this is in the case of this one where I guess the guy's search results had some, again, past criminal history, but they weren't as severe and didn't have kind of like the same nature as the first guy. And this guy had shown remorse or changed his ways, whatever. And so the judge said, yes, even though Google said that they weren't going to remove the search results, that he felt that it was valid or justified to remove them in light of all these considerations. So, kind of along the same lines as the online privacy or, the idea that everything on the internet is there forever, like nothing is removed from the internet, whatever. I guess there is this idea that you can get search results removed. Like you're not removing the pages, just the search result listings when you search for specific names, I guess. So
interesting.
Yeah, I hadn't really looked too much into the idea of like the right to be forgotten aspect. Like, and I think it's a good idea just to have that as a possibility if you wanted to. It's still left up to the search result provider to grant that request. And then if you wanted to, you could appeal that through the legal process, I guess.
But what would the negative consequence of that be? I guess through the legal process, they're kind of saying, yes, you can, no, you can't. I guess where's the line between that, and at what point does it become damaging to society to hide information of that nature?
I think the idea is like there's specific processes to get, you know, a criminal background check, right?
Yeah.
So like as an employer, you can run a criminal background check, or you can voluntarily submit one if you're applying for whatever. But just for anyone to be able to look up and get, you know, what's effectively like a background check on you, like it's almost like too easy access, or just to be
Okay.
out there, like just to kind of come across it without intentionally looking for it. I don't think the idea is to hide it or remove it from your history. It's just have it be unnecessarily damaging.
I think the one thought I want to get in on this before I leave is I think it's an incredibly interesting question, and I'm glad I'm not the person who has to make that ruling, because it sounds really hard and difficult. But with how pervasive Google itself is, and like whatever other search engines that are affected by this court decision, I think it's really interesting that since they are a pseudo monopoly in that search engine space, once stop showing the results on, or is it like
Sorry,
are there?
I think you just cut out there for a bit.
But oh man, or
Mhm.
the pages aren't gone. The pages are still there.
Yeah.
But if the only search engine that anyone uses doesn't display them, are they actually still there in the same way that, no, pleasure.
Your bandwidth is going through the floor, Nick.
I think he's trying to say, if a tree falls in the forest, will anybody hear?
He
That
does
is what I'm trying to say.
He does say that.
I'm
often.
also
I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm also
okay.
saying it was a pleasure chatting with both of you, and I have to go. Toodaloo.
Okay. See you, Nick. But yeah, no, like I think I kind of got the gist of what he was saying. So like with Google being the main / only search engine that anyone uses, and it gets removed from there, but the page isn't gone. He's saying that the information is effectively removed, even though it's not.
Yeah, because if you wanted to go find that information, you would have to know specifically which website to go look on to find it.
Right. But I think that's part of the point, is like if you wanted to look up someone's background or criminal history, like you run a proper check through the proper means, right? It's kind of like, it's like, say I could write a defamatory article about anyone, right? And it would just be there, right? So anytime, well, I mean, they have to get, you know, indexed properly and get enough clout to rise up to the top of the search results. But I mean, if it got big enough, or just some viral article that wasn't true or whatever, like if it was there, like you could get that search result removed, right? Just so again, people wouldn't come across it. So if you're applying for a job and they just did a cursory, you know, Google search on your name, just in case anything weird comes up, then at least that would pop up as being, like, you know, raising questions or whatever, right? So ideally these employers or whoever is still running proper checks if they're interested in it, but they're just not there for just to come across if they don't need to be. So I can appreciate the idea of that. And it's similar too with like, I mean, like if you're a teenager and you write some like, you know, ill-advised blog post on whatever, and it's like, oh, you know, I wrote that a while ago, like, can you take it off of search results or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Then I think you could that would be a valid case to also use that right.
Or I mean, thing. I guess if you were what's the word? If you're not convicted yet, accused.
Yeah, sure.
If you were accused of a crime and there's like media coverage and there's, you know, articles in the newspaper and things saying like, oh, well, the police suspect this guy of killing this person, and then later on he's found innocent, but you go through the search process and all you find is these, you know, the accusation, you know, where does that kind of
Yeah,
Clouds Buddy's image.
Yeah, and I don't know the specifics on like what guidelines that Google uses to decide whether something can be taken down or not. Like, because that's a good example. If someone is accused or goes through a trial and then is found like, you know, that it didn't go any further or not guilty or whatever, it's like, can that be removed if like you were never convicted but you were accused? Like, should that still be there? And I guess that's where Google's judgment and, you know, ultimately the legal system's judgment, if you decide to take it further, on if that kind of thing should be removed. But like even this article here on this first case, like the judge even says, you know, I expect this to come up many more times, especially now that this case where the judge has overturned or overruled Google's initial judgment, and saying like, you know, Google isn't the final word. Like, if, you know, sometimes Google is not having the correct or the same judgment as a judge would.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, definitely interesting, and I think it is definitely related to the online privacy and the stuff that's out there. And again, just if it's something that you might not want online later, like maybe just don't do it in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So Trina, where can people find you online, or I guess the Northern Nerd Network and the Nerdcast and all that good stuff?
Well, we have our own website called the northernnerdnetwork.com. You can also find us on Facebook if you really want to go there. Facebook.com/northernnerd. We're a little more prevalent on Twitter at @northern_nerd. And we have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/northernnerdnetwork.
Cool. Yeah. And you guys are part of the Alberta Podcast Network powered by ATB. So you can find their show and ours on albertapodcastnetwork.com. So thanks, Trina, for being here today. It was a great pleasure. Had a lot of fun.
I did too. Thanks for having me.
Cool. And we'll see you all next month.